Baruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem B'Shem Irgin Shir Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov of Smishlita on Shalos Hashchichas Linyan Brachos al Tefillin. Brachos when putting on Tefillin. We'd like to give a big yeshikayach to Rabbi Yitzchak Stern for sponsoring today's shir. The Nishmas Rabbi Chil Tzvi Bar Moshe Aya Levi Yert Oviv Yotzet Hayom Chof Teves Ten Shmos Shur B'Tzar Chaim to have the great schus of sponsoring a shir. Call Irgin Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com.
Someone put on Tefillin, Shalyad, and he made a mistake and he said the bracha al mitzvahs Tefillin. Now, how he asked the Rav the Shaila, I'm not sure. In the middle of putting on Tefillin, how do you communicate? But the question is, he made al mitzvahs Tefillin on the Shalyad. Does he have to change it? Should he keep that and make the להניח on the Shel Rosh? He was putting on Tefillin in between Shayad and Sharayish, and he heard Kedusha, and he answered Kedusha, which he wasn't supposed to. Does he have to make another bracha? Which bracha? Someone broke his hand, and he did a good job, and he broke his hand all the way up, and he couldn't put the Tefillin on his hand at all. Everything had to be put on the cast itself. So now when he puts on the Shel Rosh, he heard you make two brachas. Does that make sense to make two brachas on the Shel Rosh? So as we'll see, this is the common denominator are different questions regarding the bracha, the brachas of Tefillin, whether it's a mistake in the bracha, or he was mafsik, or he's only putting on one of the two Tefillin. And basically, as we'll see, we come to one nekuda that we have to clarify. It's something unusual, but in a mitzvah as basic as Tefillin, we see there are different minhagim in Klal Yisrael. Most Ashkenazim make two brachas on Tefillin like most of us do. The minhag of Svardim, that's the minhag of the Gra, only one bracha on Tefillin. How do you understand a difference as major as brachas on Tefillin? Now parenthetically, I want to just point out that for Tefillin, there are three major machlokes regarding the basics of the mitzvah. First of all, obviously the Rashi versus Rabbeinu Tam, something as major as that. Tefillin Chol Hamoed affects 5 days in Eretz Yisrael, 6 days a year, yet Tefillin, no Tefillin. And now we have our sig of today, two brachas or one. Maybe there's something deeper than that, but it's interesting, three major machlokes regarding Tefillin. But be that as it may, we have to understand for today, how do you understand why some hold two brachas and some hold one bracha? So if you think about it, Tefillin is different than all other mitzvahs that we have, and I'll show you what I mean. A person, we make one bracha on Daled Minim. If someone wants to be from, quote unquote, and decide to make a separate bracha on the Esrig, that's as krim as can be. Because Daled Minim are one mitzvah. You can't make two brachas on one mitzvah. Daled Kanfais is one mitzvah. Tefillin, all agree, Lesman the Polig, is two separate mitzvahs. The Rambam Sefer mitzvahs, the Chinuch and Tav Chaval, Tav Chav Beis. All the Rishonim basically say that Shalyad is one mitzvah and Shel Rosh is a different mitzvah. More so, the Mishnah says in Menachos Daf Lamed Ches, if a person only has Shalyad or only Shel Rosh, he puts on one. Daled Minim, if you're missing one, is not a mitzvah. Tefillin Shalyad, Tefillin Shel Rosh is separate, independent mitzvahs. In fact, the word tefillah in the lashon of the Mishnah, the Gemara, is one bias. Tefillin is rabbin, tefillah is one. So divide it two separate mitzvahs. Maybe you make two separate brachas. You'll say, no. If a person said toivels a whole set of cutlery, you make one bracha. Each dish that you toivel is a separate mitzvah. The teretz is pashit. If you do many of the same mitzvah and you make a lashon rabbim al tefillas kelim, you're okay. A person that puts on 5 mezuzahs on his house, so he makes one bracha because it's all the same mitzvah. So one mitzvah gets one bracha. But tefillin is very different. It's two separate mitzvahs. The Mechaber says in the Chav of Aleph, if a person only has a Shalyad, put on the Shalyad. Only Shel Rosh, put on the Shel Rosh. You know what this is like? A person has a whole Suda, and he decides to be lazy, so he makes a shackle and patters everything. No, b'di'evet, he probably is yaitza. But we know the cloud, the Gemara says in Sukkah Mem Vav, if he has a bunch of mitzvahs to do, So the first shita holds, make a bracha, asher k'tam zetvanu al ha-mitzvos. You'll pat everything. So Rabbi Yehuda, chas v'shalom. Baruch Hashem yoim yoim, tein loy me'ein b'chaysav. Make a bracha on this mitzvah and that mitzvah. So now the question is, when you have two tefillin every morning, all agree it's separate, independent mitzvahs. Why shouldn't you make two different brachas? I will give you a mashal that I know is not accurate, but it's good enough. Imagine a shaychit, he says, I'm going to make shchita, then kisi, I'll make one bracha on both. So it's honest. You can't make a shchita that doesn't go on kisui. So why should the bracha on shel yad go on shel rosh? And pashtas, this is a beferish Gemara in Brachos of Samach Amid Beis, where the Gemara has a beautiful list of brachas you make every morning. And the Gemara said, you put on the shel yad, you make the bracha laniach. You get to the shel rosh, al mitzvahs. And Tosfos Grad explains, what's the difference in the nusach? Because laniach is you're starting to do the mitzvah. So that's laniach. Al mitzvahs, you hold them by the shel rosh already, that's the end of it, al mitzvahs works. But Rabbi said, keep this in mind, what Tosfos is saying, that each tefillah gets its own bracha. In fact, Tosfos adds, and we'll soon see the tremendous halacha l'maisa, that tefillin shel rosh is more chashiv than tefillin shel yad. And that's why, even though when we say every single morning, laniach tefillin, we pater the shel rosh with that bracha also, laniach tefillin lashon rabim shel yad and shel rosh, so the shel rosh already has a bracha. But Zok Tosfos, because tefillin is more chashiv, it has the 4 different batim and has most of the Shem Shakai in it, so therefore you have to make a separate bracha on the shel rosh. So here we see that on the shel rosh you get 2 brachas nach tetzu. But certainly we see that each tefillah gets its own bracha. The Rav in Chaf He Yudal, quoting the Rosh, he says that tefillin shel rosh needs its own bracha because it's chashivas. So now the pella is, we know that Svardim and the Gra make one bracha every day based on Rashi's shita we'll soon see. How could there be such a shita if brachas Daf Samach Amid Beis says clearly there are 2 separate brachas on tefillin, one on shel yad and one shel rosh? So where is this Rashi shita? Let's learn the Gemara together because it's a big yisoid. Zok the Gemara Menachos Daf Lamed Vav, Soch bein tefillah letefillah. He spoke out between shel yad and shel rosh. What's the halacha in such a case? Chayze u'mevarich. He made a bracha on the shel yad, and then he spoke out. He has to make another bracha. What's the pshat? The simple pshat. So Rashi says, so that once you spoke out, you have to make a new bracha. Which bracha? We'll soon see the bracha al mitzvahs. But wait a second. What's wrong with talking out? If I do a mitzvah mezuzah and make a bracha, then I want to do a mitzvah tefillas kelim, I could talk out. So why can I talk out between shel and shel rosh? So the pashat pshat we just already said, because the bracha of lahaniach goes on shel rosh, so don't talk out. But there's something a little more deeper and more practical. The Chumash Hadeshin in Cheli Beis Siman Kuvav says, how about when you're putting on, if you do put on tefillin or Chol Hamoed or Beinu Tam tefillin, and there's no brachas, can you talk between shel yad and shel rosh? You're not losing a bracha, there's no brachas. So up to Chumash Hadeshin Bekitza, but if you want to see inside the Levush, in Chaf Heites is much more ma'irich, that the pasuk says, V'hoyu k'shatem la'ois, v'hoyu l'toitafais, tefillin has to be one unit, one package. Havaya achas. Tefillin shel yad and tefillin shel rosh, although it's 2 separate mitzvahs, but it should be put on as one unit. And don't have any hefsik between shel yad and shel rosh. So therefore, we have 2 reasons you're not supposed to talk out shel yad and shel rosh. Okay. Zok Gemara, and let's say he did speak out. Soch bein tefillah letefillah, chayze mevarach. You have to make another bracha. Frag the Gemara, only if you spoke out, you make another bracha? Don't we know every day you make on shel yad lahaniach and on the shel rosh al mitzvahs? Zok the Gemara, loy soch mevarech achas. Soch mevarech shtayim. What does that mean? So Rashi says, listen closely, it might be a chiddush, but says Rashi, lo yisach, if you were acting properly today, you didn't talk out between Shad and Shal how many brachas do you make on a regular basis? 1. Lahaniach. Lahaniach goes on Shal But Sach, if you spoke out and you were over, the Gemara says it's a terrible Aveira, you go back from the Mechama if you spoke out. But once you did this Aveira, Mevarech Shtayim. What does it mean, Mevarech Shtayim? Now you're going to have to make a new bracha on the Shel Rosh. Which bracha do you make on the Shel Rosh? Al mitzvahs tefillin. We'll soon see why. But Rashi holds, on a regular basis, when you're not talking out, how many brachas do you make sum total every single day? 1. The question is, how could this be? What about the more brachas? But more so, why should one bracha help for 2 different mitzvahs? So the obvious teretz probably is, even though it's 2 separate mitzvahs, but if you make a bracha that covers both, why not suffice with that? In other words, maybe it's like Tfilas Kalim, that one bracha covers a few mitzvahs, even though it's 2 separate mitzvahs. You know who says this? The Rashba. The Rashba in Aleph Kuf, in the Chuvas, Aleph Kuf Nun Vav, someone asked him, seemingly a funny question, when he takes the lulav, he makes the Natilas lulav. Now he takes the esrig in his hand, should he make another bracha? So the Rashba says, wait a minute. Madoch Tefillin, that are 2 separate mitzvahs. We only make one bracha like Rashi. So Dalad Minim, that's one mitzvah. You can't make 2 brachas. But the Rashba is understanding, like Rashi, that even though it's 2 separate mitzvahs, but if the bracha fits both, it should be enough. But wait. The Rashba in a second place, in Aleph Taf Sof Tes, someone asked, when I'm putting up 3 mezuzahs around my house, should I make 3 brachas? So again the Rashba says, wait a minute. Madoch tefillin, that are 2 separate mitzvahs in Gansin. One bracha covers all 2. So when you're doing the same mitzvah mezuzah a few times, say the bracha and include all the mezuzahs. And in the third tshuva, in Chelik Heisim and Yud Aleph, the Rashba says, B'chol haglilais in all our neighborhoods, the minhag is to make one bracha on tefillin. The Vilna Gaon, in a usually long shtickle in Bir Agra, Sifkat Yud Zayin, says, like Rashi is right, because even though it's 2 separate mitzvahs, so what? If one bracha could cover, let it suffice. And this is also the sheet of the Rif and the Rambam, the Aruch, the Arzarua, and basically, this is the minhag of Svardim Ad Hayoim, because we'll soon see the Mechaba Paskin like that. That Tefillin all agree are 2 separate mitzvahs. Tefillin all agree that the Shel Rosh needs a bracha. But Lahaniach, Tefillin, Lashon Rabim, includes Shel Yad and Shel Rosh. However, the big pliya on Rashi is that the Gemara in Brachos says, when you put on the Shel Rosh, you make a bracha on mitzvahs Tefillin. According to Rashi, when do you make the bracha on mitzvahs Tefillin? Only when you did an Aveira. For Ektoisis, that means they made a special bracha on mitzvahs Tefillin for every Aveira. It's not logical. Also, the lashon of Chayza u'mavarech sounds like Chayza means you have to repeat the bracha. Which bracha do you have to repeat? L'niach. And also, Bichlal, the whole signal in the Gemara in Menachos seems like it's talking that you have to make a second bracha. And that's why the Toisis Pshat is that every day we make 2 brachas. Like the Mer Bracha says, Laniach on the Shel Yad, Al Mitzvah on the Shel Rosh. Laniach goes on the Shel Rosh as well. But let's say you put on the Shel Yad and you made the bracha so good, and then you were mafsik, so you disconnected Laniach from the Shel Rosh. Chayza u'mavarech, 2 brachas, Laniach and Al Mitzvahs. So today you have 3 brachas on Tefillin. That's the sheet of Tosfos. Now, a lot has been said, this machlokes Rashi and Tais, you could imagine Tosfos, Rashi is Rabban Shel Yisrael, Rashi learned the Gemara Brachos, I could guarantee you, Rashi wrote a Pirush on Brachos that we learn every word of it. So, Beri Bekitza, Rashi held that the Gemara in Brachos is talking about when he spoke out. Or as we'll soon see, when he only has a tefillin shel reish. What bracha making tefillin shel reish only? Al mitzvahs. So again, Rashi, bleibt Rashi, don't forget, Rabbi Kiva Eiger says that the Tanchum is mefurish like Toisvis. The Vilna Gaon says that the Tosefta and the Zoya is like Rashi. The Rambi Panu says the Yerushalmi is like Rashi. So Lamaisa will say Rashi is Rashi, especially it's Rashi, Rif, and Rambam. How do we paskin Lamaisa? So in Shulchan Aruch Chaf Hey, Sif Hey, the Mechaber goes with Rashi, Rif, and Rambam that every single day you make one bracha laniach on both Shel Yad and Shel Rosh. That means a Svardi who does things right and never spoke out will never make the bracha on mitzvahs till in his lifetime. The Ramah says, no, we make Shel Yad laniach and on the Shel Rosh al mitzvahs. But the Ramah says, and therefore, since Lamaisa, according to Rashi, the al mitzvahs is unnecessary, Toiv, it's a good idea to say Baruch Shem after you finish the bracha. And you put on the tefillin shel Rosh. Now, this is very misunderstood, but as Mr. Brewer points out in Sivkot and Chaf Aleph, Chas v'shalom to say that we Ashkenazim, we have a terrible suffix what to do, yeah bracha, no bracha, so we'll make a suffix brachas and we'll throw in Baruch Shem and we're good. Chas v'shalom. Because suffix brachas all agrees lahakal. None of us, we go with Tosfos. We have no sveikas. We don't have OCD. We're not worried. But since Lamaisa Rashi owes no such bracha, we say it just the SSAs. In fact, the Aruch HaShulchan and Sif Yud Beis has a whole different shad. Baruch Hashem is not al suffix brachas. The Levush, Talmud of the Ramah, doesn't mention the minhag of Baruch Hashem. And obviously he held it's confusing. People think, well, I have a suffix, I'll say Baruch Hashem. Chas v'shalom. Ashkenazim have no sveikas. We follow our minhag, 2 brachas every day. But one thing I want to tell you is very, very important to mention, that all agree that the bracha lahaniach goes on the shel Rosh. According to Rashi, it's very vital, it's the only bracha on the shel Rosh. And even for Ashkenazim, the al Rosh needs 2 brachas, lahaniach and al mitzvahs. And Ashkenazim, we follow Rashi, we follow Rabbeinu Tam, because Tais is in both places, in Menachos and Brachos. The Rabbeinu Tam argues on Rashi, so we follow the Rabbeinu Tam, and the Svardim follow Rashi. Now this is unique, because most of us wear Rashi's tefillin, and the bracha we go is according to Rabbeinu Tam. Interesting. So tefillin has a few interesting points to it, but that's the Metzias. Now you'll ask me who's right, so I'll tell you exactly who's right. Whoever follows his minhag and respects the other minhag is right. Whoever does none of the above, or questions someone else's minhag is wrong. I'm going to tell you something that's pretty unusual, but it's beautiful, and it's very good insight. The Halachas Ketan is one of the G'dolei Svarad, about 400 years ago, in Chelik Aleph, Simon and Dalet, he writes, Simcha hoysali im hayisi mi mishpachas Ashkenazim. I wish I would have been born to an Ashkenazi. Why? Not because in his father get up for tzlichas the whole month. That didn't bother him. You know what bothered him? He said, I would love to make 2 brachas, because it sounds right to me. But, ma'esa she'ein li l'shanes minig avoisai. I'm not going to change my minhag. So I asked, why don't you change your minhag? I mean, you look in the Rosh, between me and you, the Rosh writes he used to make 1 bracha on tefillin, but he learned the sugya and he changed to 2 brachas. So why didn't the Rambi Pano change his minhag? You know what the answer is? Because he had a bigger simcha to follow minhag of us. So that's the right minhag in all cases, minhag of us. But the Rabbi said we could do better. Because Lamaisa Ashkenazim make 2 brachas every day, which according to Rashi is unnecessary. So we do say Baruch Shem, well, yeah or not. But Fregdeb Kiva Eiga, and this is on the Gillion, on the page, on the hit, in our Sif, I have a great idea. We could remove any element of suffix in our minhag, and this we could do every day. Zakter Kiva Eiga, when you say the bracha of Lahaniach, make a mental tanai. If the halacha is like Rashi, that really the Lahaniach goes on the shel Rosh, I want to have kavanah not to be yaitz with Lahaniach on the shel Rosh, and then I have to make a bracha Lahaniach. If halacha is like Tosfos, so Lahaniach goes on both, I want to be yaitz Lahaniach on shel Rosh also. So this way, the bracha mitzvahs on the Rosh is needed l'chol hadeyos. Now, Rabbi Akiva Eiger had gut mechaven given, because besides the fact that the Oilas Tamid says this, quoting Rambam Mipanu is one of the Kadmonim, Tshuva Simenun Tes, where the Rambam Mipanu says, if a person wants to avoid tzveikis, let him have in mind that the laniach should not cover the shel reish. The Pri Megadim says this also. But Lamaisa, the Pri Megadim says, Ve'ein l'noikein. Don't do that. In other words, you don't like Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Now, the question is, why not? What's kostet geld? What do you lose? Zok bi halacha, after Rabbi Akiva Eiger, precious thing. Because a person should not accustom himself to be mafakbik on minhag shel Yisrael. The minhag Ashkenaz make 2 brachas. So what do you want to do? Every day make a tanai, a spiel, because you have sveikas? Well, we don't have OCD. We don't have nervin. We're not worried. Our minhag is 2 brachas. So it's beautiful. The Svardim, Ashkenazim, who's right? They're both right. Whoever follows minhag avos is right. Now, for us Ashkenazim, what is the reason for the 2 brachas? Like we said, because each tefillah needs its own bracha. The meaning is also appropriate. Lahaniach is the starting, al is the culmination. The Aruch HaShulchan has a beautiful pshat, and he says that really the tefillin is unusual. It's a tremendous kesher with the Rebbeinu Shalom. It shows a tremendous ahava the Rebbeinu Shalom has to us. And he basically says that the brachas are not 2 berachas ha-mitzvahs. There's a berachas ha-hidah also, a lashon plili. The tefillin is a davapella. But the emes before the Aruch HaShulchan, the Taz's brother and the Chuvas Mari Halevi in Simin Ches, and the Taz in Chof Hei Vav quotes the entire Tshuva. He says that really tefillin is so heilig that each of the tefillah needs 2 brachas. In other words, he says that lahaniach is on the shayad and the shorosh, al mitzvahs is on the shorosh and goes backwards on the shayad. Vos epis 1 mitzvah needs 2 brachas. He says, first of all, 1 bracha is said on just the idea of the tefillin. Even if it's laying on the table and you see tefillin as powerful and heilig, as meaningful as tefillin, it needs a bracha. You pick it up and put it on your body, oh, a new bracha. But each of the tefillah needs 2 brachas. 1 on the actual, what it represents, and 1 on the lamaisa. As I state, Amriya Levi. You know what this reminds me of? I'll tell you something even more unusual. 1 mitzvah that we make 3 brachas. I don't mean Ner Chanukah, because that's of course not 3 brachas and mitzvahs. Birchas HaTorah. Lasik b'Yisrael, v'Arevna, and Shabbat Banu. And all the Achrayim wonder why 3 brachas. So some say the following analysis. Lasik is the Birchas HaMitzvah. V'Arevna is the Birchas HaNenin. The greatest pleasure is Torah. Shabbat Banu is the Birchas HaIdah. So if you could have 3 brachas on Torah, you could have 2 brachas on Tefillin. But this is basically the approach, and we understand the machlokes is Rashi and Tosfos, Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. Now let's apply it l'maisa. One thing I hope is clear, but starting from tomorrow from sure, all of us, Ashkenazi or Sfardi, when we make the bracha lahaniach, we have a mind that goes on the Tefillin shel Rosh as well, and the word Tefillin is a lashon rabim, and that was a good reminder. The Aruch HaShulchan learns that's pshat in the Zoya, bracha achas lekulan means lahaniach is on both l'chol hadeyos. Let me show you how the Poskim accepted Rashi and Tosfos l'chol hadeyos. In other words, Rashi was a nitcha for an Ashkenazi, and the Ramah is not nitcha for Sfardi. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Samach Vav Sif Tes says about a case of, for whatever reason, the person started having shachar, maybe the man was too early, whatever the case is, he didn't put on tefillin. So before Shmei Nefsa, he has to put on tefillin. So the Shulchan Aruch says, before you get to the end of Gal Yisrael, put on the tefillin with a bracha. So Zok the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Mem Zayin, when you're putting on tefillin in the middle of Ezras, don't say Baruch Shem. It's only a minhag. Now you can't say Baruch Shem in the middle of Berachas Krishma. Then the Mishnah Berurah adds, listen to this. If you listen to me, when you're putting on tefillin during Ezras, just say lebracha lahaniach. Why? Because now minimize the hefsek. And according to Rashi and according to Amachaba, lahaniach's enough. Don't make 2 brachas. So you see, even for an Ashkenazi, we go with the sheet of Rashi when you're in a shtickle of a situation. Now, I should mention that it's not a perfect raya, because I must tell you, I heard this from an Einiko, the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim himself only made one bracha on tefillin. So he was more sympathetic to Rashi, but anyhow, the Chafetz Chaim says that. Good. Now let me ask you a different shayla. Ma'aseh shehaya. A Svardi put on shel yad, lahaniach, had covered both. Then when he got to shel roish, and absent-mindedly, he started saying, Baruch atah Hashem, and he chapped. What would you tell him how to proceed? He said, Baruch atah Hashem. So everybody says, say, right? Oh, that makes it worse. Because it's a nice pasuk in Tehillim, but in between Shiyad and Sharayish, you're saying Tehillim, it's a hefsik. Then you're going to have to go back. Zogte ben Ishchai and Vayera Zayin. Ben Ishchai was from the Gdoili Sfarad. When you said Baruch atah Hashem, you know what you should do? Finish the bracha of Al Mitzvahs Tefillin. It's nicht schlecht. Half of Kleisville does it. Okay, so the truth is you have no other eights. Now, somebody asked me, why don't you make, you said Baruch atah Hashem, so don't say anything. Put on the Shel Roish, well, and then you could finish the bracha, then you could finish on Beinei Chukecha. But you're not gaining, because Baruch atah Hashem is the hefsik. It's words that don't belong there. So the truth is you see that it's, we go, both psakim are correct. Just, b'derech klal, we follow our minhag. If a person said lahaniach and he spoke out, that's the Gemara Menach, Hisach, Chayzim Avarach. Mr. Brewer says in Sifkat Lamed, even B'shoigig is a hefsik, because Zil Basa Taima. What do you mean? Once the word is, it's mafsik, who cares if you did it B'shoigig, B'mezit? And the Paiskim say even one word is a real hefsik, like these halachis. Now, you'll say, Lamaisa, what's wrong with talking out? That we said earlier, either because you can hack up the bracha, or because it's supposed to be havaya achas, and you have to keep it as one mitzvah. The question is, let's say someone spoke out. Now, what's the procedure? So let's think. Rashi holds that choiz mevarech means you have to make another bracha. Which bracha? So it's really not so mefurish in Rashi, but for us it's very, very mefurish. Because what happened? You made the bracha l'niach and you spoke out. Now you're holding at the end, you're putting on the shel roish. You have to make a new bracha. Which bracha? L'haniach or al? So it's clear in the Shulchan Aruch that then you make the bracha al mitzvahs tefillin. Why? L'haniach goes before you put anything on. Now you're holding it ready at the end, so if you spoke out, you make the bracha al mitzvahs tefillin. And I must tell you, according to Rashi, that's the pshat in the Gemara Brachos. When you put on shel yad, you make l'haniach on a regular basis. If you spoke out, Rashi would have to learn, then what in bracha do you make? Al mitzvahs. So the next time you learn brachos of Samech Hamid Beis, and you learn the Gemara, well, it's beautiful Gemara. You make 2 brachos every day. You have to say, but according to Rashi, what pshat in the Gemara? When do you make the bracha al mitzvahs tefillin? Only if sach. Tosfos has his big kasha, of course, on Rashi, and Tosfos learns kipshutai. Now the shayla is, so according to the Mechaba, when you spoke out, now on Shel Rosh you make al mitzvahs, and that's mefurish in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Chafei, Sif Tes. If you hifsik, you make al mitzvahs tefillin on the Shel Rosh. The question is, according to Tosfos, same shayla. You said l'haniach and you spoke out. Now what do? So Tosfos learns the Gemara literally. Chayz u'mevarech means before you put on the shel rosh, you make 2 brachas, l'haniach and al mitzvahs. Where do you ever have 2 brachas on one mitzvah? It's that we said earlier. Shel rosh needs 2 brachas, and you destroyed the connection. The Shulchan says it's and the Levi's have shatim. But basically, this is the uniqueness of the bracha of tefillin. You could have 2 brachas on the shel rosh itself. So this is obviously a important machlokes l'halacha l'maisa. Now, here's a beautiful kiveka. Listen to this. The point is, if a person spoke out, so now he needs 2 brachas in the shel rosh. Now, he might feel funny making 2 brachas in the shel rosh. So first, don't feel funny. That's the halacha. But Zok Magram and Sivkat and Tez, I have a good idea. Sivkat and Tez Vav, I'm sorry, I have a good idea for you. You spoke out. You have to make 2 brachas in the shel rosh. But you know it might be a better eitzah? Be mamashmeish your tefillin shel yad, move your tefillin shel yad. And there are shittas that hold, once you mamashmish, you have to make a new bracha on the shel yad. So first be mamashmish, then you can make Laniach, and then you can make also a mitzvahs, and you avoid all the problems, because you create a new bracha on the shel yad. As I state in the Magen Avram, and Mr. Berg quotes that, so if a person spoke out, memashvis the tefillin, make lahaniach, and then make al mitzvahs. What do you mean, Yelkula Alma? It doesn't work. If you create a new bracha lahaniach on the tefillin shel yad, and you said the new bracha on the tefillin shel yad, what would the Mechab advise you to do now? What would Rashi advise you to do now? Do nothing. Lahaniach patas shel reish also. So the eitzah doesn't work. Zaktim kivega. You are not going to satisfy Mechab shita. Zaktim kivega, something, an eitzah that's really unconventional. You know, it might be a better shot. Listen to this. First say the bracha al mitzvah tefillin on the shel reish. Then be mamashmish and go back to the shel yad. But the ein mashmikain v'tzarachian. Now it's interesting that the Kivega says it would be a better idea, but it's not mashmik. I think the pshat is pasha because, as we know, the pasuk says the order is first shel yad and then shel reish. If you take out the shel reish first, you don't put on the shel reish. So how to make a bracha on the shel reish before the shel yad? Now this is noteworthy. The Mishnah Berurah quotes the Magen Avram's eitzah, and it tells you, look in the Bialacha. In the Bialacha, he says, in Chadusha B'Kivega has an eitzah, and he says to say the Shel Reish first, and then go to Shel Yad. So Rav Oslin, Chelik Dalet, Simon Dalet says, I don't know why the Mishnah Berurah, the Bialacha said that. The B'Kivega didn't paskin that you should put on the Shel Reish first. He said, Ein Mashkim Etzarachiyim. So he's a little upset with the Bialacha. But Leizachisi Lahav and his Kasha, the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Magen Avram La'alacha. In Bialacha, he mentions a chiddush of Kiva'ega, and he says, Ayin Sham. Now, if you know the derech of the Chavetz Chaim, what he wants to paskin like, he writes it in Mishnah Berurah. Bialacha are interesting chidushim. But the fact that he kept the dafka in Bialacha, and he said, Ayin Sham, Mishnah Berurah also did not paskin like a Kiva'ega to say, first, because the Kiva'ega didn't paskin that way. So I think we could say that if someone spoke out, what's the procedure? Be mamash with the tefillin shel yad, then make the bracha laniach, then al mitzvahs, and you're okay. Now, what would be if someone has a wound, or something wrong with his head, whatever it is, he cannot put on tefillin shel reish. The Rav says, don't put on tefillin shel reish, you have a chtzitza, don't. Okay? Or he has no tefillin shel reish. He's only wearing tefillin shel yad today. Well, how would you advise him to proceed? So for a Svardi, it's simple. Every day is good, today is good. The question is, for an Ashkenazi, what would you say? Only wearing tefillin shel yad today. So what's the shayla? Make laniach. But then again, we saw Maria Levi and others say that each tefillah needs two. Zok the Prima Godim, in Mishpat Zahav Sivkat and Vav, based on his brother Tzak Maria Levi, if someone is only wearing tefillin shel yad one day, he makes two brachas on that tefillin shel yad. However, for us, we would be very cautious about that. Because even making two brachas on both tefillin is a machlokes, Rishonim, and Paiskim. Zok the Mishnah Berurah in Chavav Sivkat and Beis, quoting really the Ramah, that dayenu to make two brachas when you put on two different tefillin. But if you're only wearing shel yad, we have to be chayshish for Rashi. And you're only wearing shel yad, what bracha do you make? Only lahaniach. So here we see again that the Mishnah Berurah is talking being chayshish for Rashi when you have an interesting situation. Now, what's more common, especially in a yeshiva, a person breaks his hand and he does a via lamdin and he has a cast all the way up. In other words, if he has a cast on the arm, so he could put on the tefillin on his body itself, on the hand itself, makes a bracha even though he can't do the krichas on the arm. But let's say a person has a cast all the way up, so basically it's a machlokes rishonim if there is a chatzitza bichlal. You know, we put talis on. You don't have to put on your body. Tzitzis you don't have to put on your body. You put on your shirt. Mabila on the shirt, under the shirt, over the shirt. So some say tefillin also. You could put tefillin on the chatzitza. But we paskin, no. You have to put it on your hand itself, on the head itself. So what would you tell this person that Nebuch can't put on the tefillin at all on his hand? So the chayr, what he's doing basically is he's putting only tefillin shel reish. So what would we advise him? So make only on mitzvahs. And the emes is, first of all, for Svardi, what would you tell the person to do? Only one bracha. Which bracha? Zok the Karanayra Mardik Chiddush. Why do we say typically Laniach on the Shal Yad? Because it's the first. Now, it's also the first. You're only putting on the Shal Rosh. So he says, according to the Rashi, and you're only wearing the Shal Rosh, make Laniach. But it's a Pliya. Because we saw in the Gemara, according to Rashi, 2 Gemaras, when you're only wearing, when you're making a bracha only on the Shel Rosh, because you spoke out, Chazal made a special bracha, and that bracha is called Al Mitzvahs. So here, you're only wearing the Shel Rosh. What bracha should you make? Al Mitzvahs. In fact, according to Rashi, the Pshat of the Gemara brachas, that when you put on Tefillin Shel Rosh and make the bracha Al Mitzvahs, is going on this very case, that you only have Tefillin Shel Rosh. And that's why the Mechaber says in Chavav Beis, Im ein maniach el shel rosh levad, mevarach oleh al mitzvahs tefillin. So here we have for a Svardi that's only wearing for some reason shel rosh, he makes the bracha of al mitzvahs tefillin. So again, when you learn the Gemara in Brachos, that the Gemara says you make a bracha al mitzvahs on the shel rosh, according to Rashi, the pshat is when you only have a shel rosh to wear, you make the bracha on mitzvahs tefillin. Ashkenazi, what should he do? So he's only wearing the shel rosh, l'chayra, make also on mitzvahs. No. Because we said earlier, according to Ramah, the shel rosh always needs 2 brachas. And that's why we paskin, Takad Ramah says this, l'didan, if you're only wearing tefillin shel rosh, you make 2 brachas, להניח and al mitzvahs. That's why, if a person for some reason has no tefillin shel yad, he lost it, whatever it is, he puts on the shel rosh, 2 brachas. The question is our case of a cast, all the way up. So he's not putting on his hand at all. So what we tell him, same thing. Put on the shel rosh, 2 brachas. Comes again Rabbi Kiva Eiga, Simon Chav Zayin, Sif Cotton Ches. He said, I have a better idea for you. Why don't you put the tefillin on the cast, and before you tighten the tefillin on the cast, make the bracha laniach. Why? Because some shittas hold that you can make a bracha on a chatzitza. We don't paskin that way. So then the worst scenario, laniach will go on the shel rosh. This way you could separate the bracha. Instead of making laniach and on mitzvahs on the shel rosh, make laniach on the shel yad with the cast, and the worst scenario goes on the shel rosh. No, beautiful. Why don't we do that? So Rabbi Kiva Eiga, very good. Because like most shittas, putting it on that cast is garnish mitnisht, it's a hefsik. So you're making a bracha and being mafsik b'maisa. So, Michael Taibas, don't do that. Do what we said in the Shulchan Aruch, both brachas and tefillin shel rosh. Now the truth is, I had a kasha, I saw Rav Sternbuch and Chelik Aleph Simon Lamed Zayin has this kasha very strongly. He says, but if you're putting on the shel yad on the cast because you hold this one shita that you yaitza, so even if you're not yaitza, but it's still a tzairich, so he has that kasha, and it's a good kasha, but b'kiveiga is b'kiveiga. And that's the way the Ramah paskin, that's where we paskin basically, when you have a cast, the person has a cast, he should put on taka on the cast, if possible, that is. But the 2 brachas are said on the tefillin shel rosh. The next group of questions are, I guess, more healthy questions. A person doesn't have a cast and has both tefillin. But here's a common scenario. A person said the wrong bracha. Lamashal, he put on tefillin shel yad, and he said al mitzvahs tefillin. So there's no doubt about it. If he chapped right away, he should toich kadei diba, correct himself and say laniach tefillin. Don't say I mean, because that's a hefsik, but just quickly say laniach tefillin. Now, al mitzvahs tefillin, those words are a hefsik? No, it's not. Because if you did a toich kadei diba, you replaced it, so it's as if you erased it. What I did see the Kaf HaChaim, who's a Svardi, please note that, in Sifkat Lametes, he says, wait a minute, let's reanalyze your mistake. We did something pretty interesting. You have a bracha, al mitzvahs tefillin, laniach tefillin. Why don't you keep it as it is and I'll go on both? You said both brachas already. Especially, he said, we find that by Trumas and Maisers, you can make one bracha for both. He said, that's not a raya because it's one symbol mitzvah. But then he says, the whole thing of making two brachas is questionable. According to the Mechaba, for Sfardim, it's only one bracha. So although the Ashkenazim make two brachas, but in this case, you have a pretty interesting bracha. Al mitzvah tefillin laniach, so keep it. Don't change it. And when you get to Shal Rosh, what bracha would you make? Nothing. Now that's very nice coming from a Sfardi. But Tainat the Massive of the Chol Hamoed in Simon Chafes, if you cut it out, he was a Dayan in Munkach, that's good for a Sfardi, but we you have to have two brachas. And since I changed it to Lahaniach, so what do I have now? Only Lahaniach. I don't have to make a bracha on the Shal Rosh. I keep it as it is. That would be a Meshana Matbeash Tavacham Brachos. That's the most original bracha. You don't make original brachas. So I guess, especially for us Ashkenazim, if this happened to someone and he corrected a Torah Dibur, when he gets to the Shal Rosh, what bracha should he make? The regular al mitzvahs tefillin. Now, the problem often is that he made the mistake after Torah Dibur. So now the question is, he has a bracha al mitzvahs tefillin on the shel yad, and he can't correct it. What should he do? So Pashit, you will say he was Meshana from the Brachos, supposed to Laniach, he said al mitzvahs. But the emphasis is it's not a significant enough change. If someone said instead of Lasate but it's al mitzvahs, he's Yaitza. Here I could prove you that it's not a significant enough change. Because both Rashi and Taisus, Rashi is in Menachos, Taisus is in Brachos, they both say the difference between Laniach and mitzvahs is this is the beginning and this is the end. But no one says it doesn't work. Laniach doesn't work for Shel Rosh, or Al Mitzvah doesn't fit for Shel Yad. The brachas are user-friendly for both. V'raya, I could prove this. Every day we say Lahaniach, and it goes on Shel Rosh. According to Maria Levi, every day we say Al Mitzvah's Tefillin, and it goes on both. So the brachas fit either. Navas, it's more correct to Lahaniach on beginning, at the end. But can we say after the fact, if you said al mitzvahs on the shel yad, and then you decided to hope for the best, and you said lahaniach on the shel rosh, so you got both brachas. Especially according to the way the Rosh understood, where the Rav explains the Rosh, that shel rosh needs its own bracha. You did that. Okay, an original new bracha. So that's why I saw Taka most Paiskim say, I'm talking about the Prima Godim and the Shari Tshuva, the end of Sifkat and Hay, that if you said al mitzvahs on the shel yad and you can't correct Torah Dibur, keep it as it is, put on the shel rosh and make the bracha lohaniach. It's not a shinoi, you have two brachas, you satisfy l'chayra, a b'di'eved, all of the real needs that we have. The real challenge, which sometimes happens, is someone said lahaniach on the shel yad, and I guess he has good practice, he got to the shel rosh, vaita lahaniach. So now he has two separate brachas, but two laniachs. So the problem is, are you yaitze with a second laniach? And you have to realize this is double jeopardy. Because if you hold you're not yaitze with the second laniach, then it's a hefsik, you have to go back and start again. It's like someone said shahakal on the shel rosh because he's more into his coffee than his tefillin. What happens then? Go back and say laniach again. So we would wonder, what's wrong with lahaniach on the shel rosh? Every day we say lahaniach on the shel rosh. Right? Lahaniach goes on the shel rosh for Sfardim and Ashkenazim. But there's one point. Once is enough, not twice. So basically, how can you say two lahaniach should work? And that's probably why the Tila David and Sifikat and Vav has this very shaila, and he says, probably it's Meshana B'dei Shetava, but besides that, the same bracha twice, V'tzorach iyun, he says, I don't know what to do. Then I saw the Birchas Habayis, Lamed Ches Tes Vav, has this shaila, and he says, Laniach, the second Laniach is not Yaitza, and you have to say al mitzvahs tefillin. So it bothered me, wait a minute. Go, okay, I'm asking. But Vivayt, you're not Yaitza with Laniach, why isn't it a hefsik? So I looked further, and he said, but, he says, same shtickle. If you said L'sate Batzitzes on the Shel Rosh, by mistake, of course, then you have to go back and say Laniach and Al Mitzvahs again. But regarding Laniach twice, it seems he holds that you don't have to go back, just say Al Mitzvahs, Manishtana. I looked in the bottom, Baruch Hashem, he asked the kasha. He says, if he said L'satef on the Shel Roish, that's totally off track, that's a hefsek. But Laniach on the Shel Roish, you're not Yoitza. But it's not like, not Minyana. So it's you're not Yoitza with it, but it's not a hefsek. A new svar. So I needed some more, and I found something beautiful, mamish beautiful. In the Halicha Shloima, in Perek Dalet, Siman Yud Ches, Shlomo Zalman Paskin, this very shaila, if he said Laniach twice, then you have to just go and say another Al Mitzvah and don't repeat Laniach. And you know what he says? Something so penetrating. He says, let's see what you want to do. You said Laniach once. You said it again. So Laniach is a hefsek. And therefore, what do you want to do? A third Laniach? Doesn't make sense. How could that be? So he says it can't be a third Laniach. So what do? Just make Al Mitzvahs and give Aita. Which is not really like a very powerful svar, but it can be. Then I saw the Shevet HaKasi Chelik Hey Dalid, and this is mamish the dessert of this sugya, the shaila, and he says, I think Laniach could be, but B'diavad Yoitza. He says, if B'diavad Yoitza can't be. Because let's say a person spoke out mamish, soch bein tefillah l'tefillah, according to Rama, what do? Laniach and Al Mitzvahs. Why don't you say only Laniach and let it go on the Shel Roish? So how could this Laniach, why shouldn't this Laniach go on both? He says, no, it's not a kasha. He says, because if you said Laniach, good on the Shel Yad, then another Laniach, no, maybe that goes on the Shel Roish and you're okay because you have a new bracha on the Shel Roish. But let's say you said Laniach and you spoke out, so now what do you have on your record card? 0. Laniach is puzzle. You need 2 brachas because you have no brachas. But in our case, maybe Laniach on the Shayad, and on Shel Roish, you yaitz with the new bracha, like the Rav says. But as we saw, most poskim say that you can't use Laniach on the Shel Roish. I think the right way to do it is make Al Mitzvahs on the Shel Roish, and you don't have to repeat the Haniach weiter. We had a shaila once, a person put on tefillin, and he didn't, without making a bracha at all. Either he forgot, maybe he was used to Chol Hamoed, I don't know what happened, but he forgot to make brachas. So that's in Shulchan Aruch, we find in other places. If the mitzvah was finished, l'mashli shuk lulav, I forgot to make a bracha, too late. But if the mitzvah is continuous, like he's sitting in the sukkah, and he realized he didn't make a bracha, so make a bracha right then and there. So here also you have a simple option, make the bracha wherever you are. Make the bracha, I guess it's better to be mashmesh to Shel Yad, make Laniach, mashmesh to Shel Roish, and then make Al Mitzvahs Tefillin. The question is, if he put on, this Mechaber speaks about, I'm not sure how these things happened, but I stopped asking. A person put on the Shel Roish first. So it's a major problem, because the Pasuk says Shel Yad goes first. So really, if he put on the Shel Roish first, take it off and start again. But let's say he made the bracha on the Shel Roish first. And he made the bracha on mitzvahs like he always does. So then the eitz is pashut. I mean, the best eitz would be put on the Shel Yad quickly and make the necessary bracha of Laniach Tefillin. Someone asked me the following true story. He put on the Shel Yad with the right bracha. He put on the Shel Roish and started davening, and then he realized he thinks he didn't. He was not sure if he made a bracha on the Shel Roish. So he became a paisik and said, you know what I did? I spoke out, and then I made a bracha on the Shel Roish. I said, wait a second, you got a few mistakes there. First of all, the talking out only is effective between Shel Yad and Shel Roish. Also, your shaila is safik brachas lahakol. So it's not going to help talking out. What you should have done is just be more careful tomorrow and go weiter today. And that avad is the right cloud. That if you have a safik brachas, reish tes siv gimel, safik brachas lahakol. The last group of questions is certainly, in a certain sense, most challenging. And that is a person did everything right, but he did something, I guess, a little too right. And that is he spoke out, or he answered Kedusha, he spoke out between Shel Yad and Shel Roish. So the truth is, until today, we would wonder, so what's so bad if he said Kedusha between Shel Yad and Shel Roish? It's a mitzvah deraisa. If you person made a bracha on Tefillas Kalim, and he spoke, and then he toivel, then he made bracha on mezuzah, you ought to talk in between 2 different mitzvahs. So why can't you talk between Shel Yad and Shel Roish? Oh, But that we know. That thing we're in sight of Mem Dalid on Mebeis. Sach bein tefillah to tefillah is aveira biyadei v'chayzeh me'archel nechama. Terrible aveira. Why is it a terrible aveira? We have two svaras. Either you ruin the bracha lahaniach, or, and I should say, you break the havaya acha, it's supposed to be together. Even on Chol Hamoed, and even on Beinu Tam Tefillin, where you don't make any brachas, you're not to be mafsik shal yad and shal reish. Okay, the truth is, those that wear Beinu Tam Tefillin, if they have kedusha, you're allowed to answer kedusha, because in that case, we rely on the main problem being the brachas. But no doubt about it, every day you wear tefillin, for two reasons you can't talk between shal yad and shal reish. So that's why lamaisa, we don't talk. Havaya achas. But the shaila is, lamaisa, what happens if we spoke out? So again, it's something that we have to realize that tefillin is supposed to be one. I watched Rav Moshe Feinstein many times putting on tefillin. She made the bracha on the shayad, he tightened it, he made one kricha on his arm, and right he put on the shal reish. So as a young child, we said, hey, Moshe doesn't know the halachas, what's going on here? Of course, Moshe knew the Shulchan Aruch that quotes the Rosh, that because it's avaya achas, do it vashneller. Just be yaitza minimally, put on the shal reish, and then go back and straighten out the shayad. Okay, our minhag is not like that, even though the Machaba in Sif Yud Aleph quotes this Rosh. But certainly, what you see people, I saw the Senior Rav says it's a terrible mistake people do. They put in the shal reish with the 7 krichas. Then they put the little box on the bias. Then they pull the shirt sleeve down. Then they put the jacket on. Then they straighten out the box. I mean, it's supposed to be much, much quicker than that. Just do what you have to do. You could put the box on and you could put the sleeve on later. But the Maisa, we try to keep shal yad and shal reish one. In fact, according to some days of Paiskim, La Maisa, even a non-verbal gesture, remiza, just a remiza is a hefsik. It's more than just a diba hefsik. It has to be one. But Baruch Hashem, we don't paskin that way. But a diba of a hefsik is a gemara, a very biyadai. So that's why you have to be very careful not to make any hefsekim. The question is, if someone was, so involved with the kedusha, he heard kedusha and he answered kedusha, between shayad and shal reish, what should he do? So in Shulchan Aruch Sif Chaf Hey Sif Yod, the Machaba says, if he talks to tzarech tefillin, it's okay, but don't answer kaddish and kedusha. Better listen and be yoyt shemeika oina. So all agree we don't answer kedusha between shayad and shal reish. Zok the levush and the Nachlas Tzvi Magen Avram El Yerabah Chayodam, the Rechaim, a whole list of places I have. And let's say he did say kedusha between shayad and shal reish. So it's an unfortunate tzach, and he has to repeat the bracha להניח and al mitzvahs on the shel reish. Zok Taz, however, the Mechaber's lashon is don't answer kedusha. It seems like b'diavad you answered, it's not a hefsik. Why not? Because the truth is, some say you're allowed to answer kedusha. It's a tzarech hamakom. So b'diavad, if you did answer kedusha, even though it wasn't the right thing, keep it as it is and just make al mitzvah on the shel reish. Now that's a very challenging psak for a rav. You're talking about Lavush, Nachal Tzvi, Magen Avram, El Yerabah Chayodin, Der Chaim, and others say 2 brachas. Taz says 1. So here the Chavetz Chaim says another one of his gems. In Bi'alacha, on that Mechaber, he says, he quotes the Arz HaChaim, that Lamaisa, to make 2 brachas, are you certain you have to make 2 brachas now? First of all, according to Rashi, there's no such thing as 2 brachas. So only one's, al mitzvah is enough. Right? And also, according to some sheets, you're allowed to answer kedusha. It's not a hefsik b'diavad. So it's a svek sveika, and just say al mitzvahs if you said kedusha. In other words, you can do it anyhow. So, but have a mitzvah and let it go back on the shayat, and don't repeat 2 brachas. So here you see once again that the Mishnah Berurah is very sympathetic to the sheet of Rashi. That you make a svek sveika and keep it as it is, only make al mitzvahs on the shel reish. Now, of course, a Svardi, I saw, should not answer kedusha between yad and reish. Dr. Kafachayim, if he did answer kedusha, he doesn't say anything. Because we have the Mechaber, that maybe you're allowed to say it. So, but the Yebet, you don't repeat the bracha at all. That's for a Svardi. Next question, again, interesting, another shaila. If someone hears they're about to say kedusha, or Yeshmei Rabbah, so either don't start putting on tefillin, wait till you can answer kedusha, Or, if he already started tefillin, it might be kedai to do like Rosh, Shulchan Aruch, Rav Moshe, make the kesher, make one kricha, put on the shal reish properly, and then you can answer kedusha because you finished the hanachas tefillin. What's much more challenging, someone put on shal yad with a bracha. In between shal yad and shal reish, his friend made a bracha on tefillin, and he impulsively said amen. Now, amen is a wonderful thing, but amen is a hefsek. Nothing goes between shal yad and shal reish. So now, with that one word, shaygig, he became a gemara, sach bein tefillah tefillah, chayz mavarich, later amah, he has to make two brachas. And that's the truth according to many poskim. Even one word, amen, is a hefsek. The only way to salvage this situation is a chiddush, gadol of the panim meiris and aleph nun tes, that a regular amen on someone else's bracha, on that's no a bichas, a shachar, lamashal, tak, it's a hefsek, and you're back to sach. But amen on the same bracha you said is reinforcing your bracha. So maybe amen on tefillin is not a hefsek. Givega and Chaf Hey Tes says, really? We don't make a bracha, but we don't make amen. Here in Kishul, do rather. But most don't make amen. Before Krishma, it's the same bracha. So Givega says, any amen, even amen on tefillin is a hefsek. And the Panim Meiris himself in the later tshuva in Beis Hey says just that. He seems to have retracted that even amen on the same bracha is a hefsek. So let me be very clear. Never say amen to any bracha between Yad and Shel Rosh. Rav Moshe in Chelik Beis, Simon Kuf Yud says, if you did answer amen to someone else's tefillin bracha, you're a sach and chayz and mavarech shtayim for an Ashkenazi. I hope you could say this, that if you put tefillin on enough, it was on your head enough, that you could say maybe you were yotzei the hanacha with that, and you said amen, then you could be soymech on a sveka maybe that you could keep it as it is. The Mishnah Berurah writes something extremely negeya to mitzvah lefarsim, and he says that Baruch Shem is not part of hanachas tefillin, it's an addition. Make sure you say it correctly after you put the tefillin on your head properly, not just put it on. You tighten it, you straighten it out, so now you are yotzei. If you say Baruch Shem before the tefillin are on halachically properly on your head, Zok Tila David and Sifkat and Ches, it's a sach bein tefillah and tefillah. You spoke out before the tefillin was chal. Now the Brachos Abayis also says v'tzorachin if you have to repeat the bracha. So again, be very careful not to say Baruch Shem until the tefillin are properly on your head. Just leave you the few interesting shaylas. The Paiskim, we had the shayla, a person absent-mindedly on Chol Hamoed said, and his minhag is to wear tefillin and not make a bracha, which is the minhag of many people. Although the Ramah says to make a bracha on tefillin on Chol Hamoed, but his minhag was not to. He absent-mindedly said, Baruch Atah Hashem on the Shal Yad, which happens very often for those that wear tefillin. Now what should he do? So l'chayra, amdeni chukecha. But we said before it's not a good eitzah. But that's only between Shal Yad and Shal Rosh that you said Baruch Atah Hashem. Here, Baruch Atah Hashem likes to say amdeni chukecha and then put on the Shal Yad without a bracha. The only point is that the Magen Avram says this clearly in Kuf Lamed Hey, that saying Baruch amdeni chukecha is not a perfect eitzah. You can't transform from a bracha into tilim. And he says, only do when you have no other choice. So maybe Taki here, you go with the Ramah, that you make a bracha on tefillin. But to me, it doesn't sound right for the simple reason that the Mishnah Berurah says that the Taz and many poskim say not to make a bracha on tefillin. Now, if your minhag is to make a bracha on tefillin, so you're doing the right thing. But if your minhag is not to make a bracha on tefillin, and here you started, it's probably better to say amdeni chukecha. Rav Vosna in Chelik Dal, Tes Simon Gimel, says if someone went to the bathroom, so it's a big machlokes, some hold you have to make both brachas. Magen Avraham says you don't make any bracha because it's not enough of a hefsek. So he has his chiddush. What might be the right option is to make only one bracha. Why? Maybe b'chai gavna it's enough of a suffix. We rely on the shita of Rashi. And last but not least, listen to this incredible yisoid. The Levushay Mordechai has a shayla nebuch in Tanyana Simon Hey. Someone checked his tefillin after years and found that there's something wrong with the tefillin shel yad. Something wrong with this puzzle. So he felt distraught that he wasn't Yaitz Tefillin Shayad, but it bothered him also the Brachos Levatala. So he Moshe Mordechai says maybe that's not so bad. Because since Lamaisa, the Leaniach Tefillin also goes on the Tefillin Shah, right? So that might salvage B'di'eved the situation. I can talk to you.